Hey everybody, it's Canuck here. Today I was hoping to talk a little bit about imposter syndrome, which is something that likely people watching this video have heard of before, but in the context of cancer, it's a little bit different. So for those who aren't familiar with what imposter syndrome is, it's basically just a feeling that you don't belong where you are, even though you're supposed to be there. There's probably like a more clinical definition of it, but I think that's the easiest one to work with. So if you can imagine a scenario where maybe you've just graduated college or university, you're starting, your first like real job, and you get there on day one and you just see how competent everybody seems. They really look like they belong there. And you're sitting there with your computer, looking at the screen, wondering why you've been entrusted with your responsibilities. You feel like you haven't earned the right to belong. And that's really what is at the crux of imposter syndrome. How that relates to cancer is a different story. There are a lot of stages of cancer. There are a lot of different types of cancer. Some cancers are curable. Some cancers are not. Some people can get treatment. Some people can't. Sometimes treatment is harder on other people than it is on you. And because of that, it's really easy to feel like your experience doesn't matter because by comparison, there are other people that are going through worse treatments, worse cancers. And it's not to say that, there are easy cancers and hard cancers. I don't believe that at all. But what I am saying is that some cancers are more receptive to treatment in the sense that sometimes it requires a simple surgery and sometimes it requires, hundreds of rounds of maintenance chemotherapy to keep a person alive. And I do think it's worth acknowledging that there's a difference between those two things. But at the end of the day, both folks still have cancer. They've both sat on the receiving end of, an oncologist saying, you have cancer. Both have had their lives upended. And so to make the comparison, I think, as it relates to the disease specifically, it doesn't factor in all of the other things that happen when you receive a cancer diagnosis. So the stage 4 person who is metastatic, maybe there's, not much that can be done in terms of curative intent. They're on systemic care. They heard those 3 words and had their life turned upside down. And if you're a stage 1 person and you receive those, words as well, you've also had your life upended. A lot of the things that metastatic patients worry about are the same things that folks that are not metastatic have to worry about too. So don't feel like your experience is diminished because maybe you were diagnosed at stage 1 or 2 and, by comparison, your treatment was simpler than other people. Because your cancer experience is subjective. It caused you a lot of pain. It upended your life. It made things difficult for you. It maybe introduced some new mental health challenges that you have to face now. There's a fear of recurrence, I'm sure. I was diagnosed at stage 3C. It's not the best diagnosis I could have received. It's not the worst diagnosis I could have received either. At least I was able to have surgery and my cancer was approached from a curative intent perspective. But it doesn't mean that the chemotherapy that I went through or the surgery I went through wasn't hard. I know that there are people that have stage 4 colorectal cancer that are in way worse shape than I am, that have had a lot of surgeries, that have had, high pumps installed and all kinds of different medical procedures. But it doesn't mean that my experience has any less value. The thing about cancer is that it is a subjective experience. Your pain, your story, that's yours. You can own that. And you don't need to be ashamed or feel like you're out of place reaching out for peer support or participating in cancer community things just because you weren't diagnosed with advanced cancer. Another big thing to realize is that as I've talked to a lot of folks that have different types and stages of cancer, there are quite a few people who are diagnosed with sort of lower stages that are afraid to participate in peer groups because they feel like their story doesn't matter. They feel like if they go in and say, you know what, I had to have surgery to get something removed and now I'm all good, they feel like that isn't as important as somebody who maybe is dealing with, lifelong systemic treatment. Here's what I'll say to that. The cancer community is really supportive. There's no resentment between folks that are stage 4 and, metastatic and folks that aren't. I think what's really important is that we all need to understand that our collective stories really shape the greater public's perception of the disease. And so The stage 4 person might want to be really passionate about being an advocate or spreading awareness. However, their treatment, physical condition, mental health might prevent them from being in a position to do that. Whereas if you're a lower stage person, the odds are that the treatment isn't as harsh, it isn't as regular, and perhaps you're better positioned to be an advocate and to storytell so that you can pay it forward, maybe, for the people who aren't able to actually do those things, whether they want to or not. All that said, there's no reason to feel like an imposter if you've been diagnosed with cancer. It doesn't matter what type of cancer you were diagnosed with. You were still diagnosed. It's still totally screwed up your life. And you know what? There's no harm in participating in community groups if you're a lower stage individual. I would just encourage you, regardless of where you are in your cancer experience or living with cancer, just don't diminish your story. It's important. The fact that you were diagnosed with cancer means that you are very different from a lot of people that walk this earth. And your story matters just as much as anybody else's. Don't feel like you don't belong. If you've got cancer, there's a place for you in the cancer community, and you will find the support that you need to power through whatever it is you're going through. Just don't beat yourself up by comparing yourself to other people. It doesn't work in real life, and it doesn't work in cancer land either. Be kind to yourself. Give yourself grace, and realize that your cancer experience has the same value as anyone else's. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk. We'll catch you at the next one. Peace.